If I don't get loud enough, let me know. If I get too loud, let me know. We got a good program here, and for the sake of a little extra strength, so I make sure that you can hear me. I'd like to welcome everyone today on behalf of the Willoughby Historical Society for this official opening of 1986. Doesn't seem possible. And at this time, if you would all please stand, we'll have our good friend Mike play the national anthems. If you'd remain standing, please. In honor of two very important members who passed away very recently, namely Rita Somerville and Fred C. Bruning, we'd like to observe a moment's silence. Thank you. You may be seated. Now, do we have anyone representing the city of Niagara Falls here? As yet, we understand that our mayor was unable to attend, but the alderman or alder lady, Mrs. Donna Colville, was to be here, so possibly she'll be here a little later, and at that time we'll ask her to bring greetings from Niagara Falls, the city. So in the meantime, in the absence of Mr. Mac Cushing, we have Bud Burns, our good neighbor here at Black Creek, representing the Niagara Parks Commission. So Bud, if you'd give us your message at this time, please. What's that cord, Bud?
Got a bit of a skipping rope here. It's pretty hard for me to wear two hats today, but I bring you greetings on behalf of the Niagara Parks Commission. The Willoughby Historical Society is certainly one organization that we're happy to have on board with us. The Parks Commission although they do not do as much as we sometimes would like to do in the historical field. We're certainly happy that we do have a group such as this to represent the area. Then on the other side of the hand, or the other hat that I have to wear, I guess my roots are Willoughby. I've been associated with Willoughby all of my life, and finally, when it came time to get married, I decided to live in Willoughby. I've been here for a good many years. I can remember many, many winter mornings going down this road when it was pretty well plugged, but there we had the milk truck and stopped at every farm along the way, including Howard Fox up here, and I can remember the McCrady's, Al Weavers, and so on and so forth. Many of you remember them all. Henry Willick. I could go on reminiscing, but it's certainly a pleasure to maintain my roots in Willoughby, and I think they always will be. But on behalf of Niagara Parks, we're certainly happy that you people can make use of this building and carry on part of the charter of Niagara Parks, which is to preserve and conserve. And after all, that's what life is all about. We all like to remember the other days. We like to look forward to the future, but I hope the future never takes over from the past. So on behalf of Niagara Parks, I just want to bring the greetings and thank you for the job you're doing and wish this society all the best in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Bud. And certainly I think I can speak on behalf of the Willoughby Historical Society and the museum here that we're very, very fortunate to have a place along the Niagara Parks and the support of the Niagara Parks Commission. And some of those memories you reminded me of, Brother Fred there, I think, and I think Earl Weaver, and I don't know if there's any other young fellows here, but they have memories too of this old road when you delivered milk down here. And the McCrady's, I often think of them. Fred and I trekked up here to school past the McCrady place. And I still admire that little old house there. And when we went by, they used to feed the pheasants there, and there was always a nice group of pheasants right out from under those trees there. I think it was only yesterday I tasted one of those beautiful locust flowers that we used to stop and nibble at when they were in bloom. And a lady had some here. Well, I guess it was Columbus up here. He had some on his on their dining room table there. So I took one and I ate it. And boy, did that ever remind me of old times. We used to really enjoy those flowers. So your message is certainly well received, and we agree with you. Let's not forget about the past. Thanks again, Bud. Now, Mr. Bob Hanna, and Bob is chairman of the Recreation Commission of Niagara Falls. So at this time, Bob, if you would come forward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thought I'd come this way. I'm not too good at tripping over cords, so I thought I'd take the safe way around. Another perfect Sunday afternoon. I guess, Mrs. Glenn, you're blessed with good weather each June. Do you plan it this way? When I go on vacation, I'll be sure and call. On behalf of the Recreation Commission of the City of Niagara Falls, and if Donna Covell does not arrive here this afternoon, I guess on behalf of the City of Niagara Falls, I bring greetings. I urge the Willoughby Historical Society to continue in their cultural activities. Obviously, the preservation of the history of Willoughby is very important to those residents, as I've just found out not only last year, but in the few words that are being spoken here today by those residents that have spent many years here. It is certainly very important to you all. I urge you to continue on behalf of the city with the preservation of your cultural activities. Also, on behalf of the Recreation Commission, I would like to offer my congratulations to the Mennonites of Ontario on the occasion of their bicentennial year, and may I wish them every success. In closing, I guess, may I just urge everyone to keep up the fine work. I appreciate the invitation, and I can assure you, as long as I am connected with the Recreation Commission, I will appreciate the opportunity to attend this open house. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Bob. And I think you have a big job to do in the city there, and I think it's well done. What I've seen of it, that invitation in the fall there to all the volunteer groups and so on is certainly well received. So we certainly appreciate your efforts in your work as chairman of the Recreation Committee. Next, we have a museum report and a special dedication of a plaque in honor of Miss Miller. So I'm not sure who's going to give this report. Emma is, I believe. Thanks, Emma.
Greetings, Mr. Chairman, honored guests, and friends. On behalf of the Willoughby Museum Committee, I welcome you all here today. It wouldn't dare rain on us. We just wouldn't allow it. We would like to congratulate the Mennonite churches on their 200th anniversary. And Mennonites are very much a part of this area's history. And on display this year in our main showcase in the museum are some items that belong to Jacob Miller, a pioneer settler in Willoughby, who was a circuit minister of Mennonite faith. And the Bible, the little Bible that we have on display in there, is dated 1799. It has his signature inside and written in German. And this was the little Bible that he carried with him on his circuit ministry on horseback. At this time, we would like to remember Miss Zeddy Mae Miller with a plaque. She was a descendant of a pioneer family. Her great-grandfather, was Jacob Miller. She was one of the founders of this museum, and she donated so many historical items and time and information towards the museum collection and the preservation of local history. And she's also known for encouraging other families to keep track of their history. This plaque that I am going to show you now will be placed in the showcase along with the other artifacts that we have from her family. And on the plaque it says, Zed Mae Miller, a descendant of a pioneer family of Willoughby Township, in recognition as one of the founders of the museum for the numerous artifacts donated, involvement in preserving local history, dedicated June 1986. During the past year, a committee was formed to prepare terms of reference in preparation for a feasibility to be done on expanding the Willoughby Museum. We have finished the first draft. It's been sent to the Ministry of Citizenship and Culture for their suggestions, and now we are just waiting for their reply. Carpentry work was done during the winter to enlarge the showcase upstairs, and we can hold many more items in it now. A new display area was constructed downstairs, and more floodlights were added, and emergency lights are being installed as well. Several new articles on view this year, including pieces of furniture from Miss Miller's collection, a quilt made of men's silk ties, and a coverlet made of silk squares that were collected from Sweet Caporal tobacco products. It's quite unique. We're still cataloging new items that we recently received, and we're looking forward to a visit from the Conservation Laboratory in Toronto and they'll come and give us advice and assistance on proper care and preservation of our artifacts. We've also recently received a donation of a bronze plaque to be placed in the museum in memory of Christian Hershey, 1768 to 1845, and his wife, Mary Sipe, 1771 to 1854, who were buried in a family plot on their farm, Lot 15, Concession 1, Riverfront, which is on Miller Road as you go up the side road to your right on the first hill. They were pioneer settlers of Willoughby, and they were great-great-grandparents of Miss Zettie May Miller. Their daughter, Barbara Hershey, was the wife of Jacob Miller. The plaque was donated by the descendants of two of their daughters, Esther Shirk and Margaret Dunn. At this time, we would like to remember two of our faithful members who we lost recently, Fred C. Bruning and Rita Somerville. They worked so actively in the museum since it was founded, and they will be greatly missed. And a fitting remembrance of their contributions will definitely be forthcoming. We're happy to see you all here today and hope that you'll take time to see the rest of the museum if you didn't have time before the open house program. Stay afterwards, have refreshments, renew old acquaintances, and make some new ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. What she read to you or spoke to you represented a lot of work, and for you people who have visited the museum regularly, you'll probably see the difference from as of last year, and certainly our little building is getting crowded. We hope that one of you people, or I myself, win a sweepstake someday that we can build a good addition on the side of this here. And of course, if anyone wants to put something in their will about that, why, I imagine it would be gratefully received, because we're bulging at the seams here. At this time, we'll back up on our program, and we have our alder lady, Mrs. Donna Colville, here now, who is going to bring greetings from Niagara Falls. Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Burning. While it's a pleasure to be here today, Mark was supposed to come, Mr. Hopkins, but he's on the Trent sailing, so he asked me if I'd come in his place. I'd just like to say it's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Mayor and City Council. I hope your museum prospers in the next year and that you get all the donations that you're looking forward to. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Donna, and you know, we'd rather get donations than grants, and since grants are hard to get anymore, why, we'll look forward to the donations. This time we'll ask Mr. Harold Nigh to speak to us on the Mennonite history of our township. Mr. Nigh.
I've asked my wife Mildred to distribute some maps of the Niagara region that have a few details on to which I'd like to refer. Maybe not all of them, but some of them at any rate. I'd like to say, while she's doing that our family has some pretty deep roots in Willoughby Township, although we haven't lived here for quite a few years. My grandfather's grandfather was Adam Nigh, and he's listed on the 1837 Willoughby tax rolls. I think he paid his taxes that year. And as far as my wife is concerned, her great-great-grandfather was Michael Grohl, G-R-O-H. And he came up from Pennsylvania, having bought land or got land in the Kitchener area about 1803, and he took sick and died here near Boyers Creek and is buried somewhere in that vicinity. And we don't know where he is buried, but he is buried somewhere here in Willoughby Township. So on both sides of the family, we have deep roots here. I'd like to say at the outset that the last time we were at the meeting of your historical society, we had a much more violent confrontation than we're having today. The last thing we did, we had what was called Minnow Van at that time, was a mobile home in which a team was going across Canada. The last thing we did was to back into the car of one of your members and did quite a bit of damage to it. I think that that has been taken care of. I noticed on the way coming down here that the museum sign had a smoking cannon, and I thought that was perhaps kind of fitting for the reception we might have got after having done all that damage. But I know it's a much more peaceful welcome that you've given us, and that befits Mennonites and Tunkers. Let me just call attention to a few things on this map. First of all, I've noted the numbers of Mennonites and Tunkers in the Niagara region in the 1841 census. And you'll notice that there are quite a few here, especially in Bertie Township and in Clinton Township, and a fair distribution of them in other parts of the region as well. There are Mennonites in most of the areas, not nearly so many Tunkers as Mennonites, but there were a lot of Tunkers in the Pelham area where they came originally, and also in the Black Creek area a little bit later. Now, back just a couple of weeks ago, I was asked to do a paper on the early history of the Mennonites, the Tunkers, and the Quakers in the Niagara Peninsula, and I thought that I would use some of the material that I gave at that time as a background for perhaps a better understanding of something of the bicentennial celebrations of the Mennonites and Brethren in Christ. The first question I'd like to ask is, what happened to the Mennonites, the Tunkers, and the Quakers in the Niagara Peninsula? Because you'll see from this map that they were here by the hundreds in 1841, and I believe that according to that census, they were the second, if taken together, they were the second most numerous religious body in the peninsula. Now there are very few Mennonites left. There is that is of the so-called Swiss Mennonite extraction, the ones that came over a couple of centuries ago. There's a small congregation in Vineland, and then there's a small congregation of Reformed Mennonites in Stevensville that comprises families from Stevensville and Port Colborne as well. But outside of that, there are very few. So far as the Tunkers are concerned, there are more of them concentrated mostly in the Stevensville and Waynfleet area. And in regard to the Quakers, there are none left in Black Creek, and just one congregation left in Pelham. Let me suggest 3 reasons why the Mennonites have virtually disappeared. And I'll be talking about the Russian Mennonites that came considerably later, a little bit later on. First is perhaps lack of leadership. Now, there was strong leadership in the person of George Zavitz in the early days, and after him, John Zavitz. And of course, here in Willoughby Township, Jacob Miller. But after the first 50 years or so, there seemed to be a dearth of good leadership. I did some investigation into the Sugarloaf Mennonites, or the ones up around Port Colborne, and I had a great deal of difficulty in finding the name of one Mennonite minister outside of the Reformed Mennonite movement there after about 1812, 1815, thereabouts. There was one by the name of John Rathven Jr., who is mentioned once as being a Mennonite minister, a farmer, and a Mennonite minister, and he was owner of the big stone house there along the lake that is now known as Rathven Inn. But generally, there was a lack of strong leadership. The second reason for the disappearance of the Mennonites is because of the proselytizing by other groups, such as the Methodists, the Evangelical Association, and the United Brethren. And in the latter part of the 19th century, most of the Mennonites went to one of these 3 groups, or to the Tunkers, which also were called Brethren in Christ later on. A third reason for their disappearance was their early acculturation. That's a term that the sociologists use for being integrated into the community and losing their particular identification. And I think there might be a couple of reasons for that, at least. One is that English was used fairly early here. Although the Mennonites were chiefly of German extraction and German speaking, they did use, quite a few of them did use English. And I believe John Zavitz, for instance, who acted as something of a bishop, preached in English most of the time, at any rate. The fact that they lived very close to the Quakers, who were English speaking, may have had something to do with that. Another reason for their early acculturation was that there was quite a bit of political involvement fairly early. Now, there were 2 strands among the Mennonites and the Tunkers, not among the Quakers, because they always were ready for political involvement as soon as they were able to be involved. But among the Tunkers and the Mennonites, there were some who believed that it was wrong to have any kind of political involvement. Then there were others that got involved quite early. Let me give you a couple of examples. John Stoner was one of the early pioneers in the Port Colborne area, and a family history says of him that he would have nothing to do with even local political office because he was a strong Mennonite and adhered very closely to his faith. Then on the other hand, there was a man by the name of Jacob Grable, Michael Grable, I'm sorry, who built the house now known as Rathven Inn, who was involved politically quite early. He acted as squire or tax collector for John Graves Simcoe, and Simcoe used to even come around and pay him a visit and collect the tax money quite early. And there were several others like that that had quite a bit of early political involvement. This was in contrast to the Tunkers, for instance, of Bertie Township, that under the leadership of John Winger and Jacob Sider refused to have political involvement. However, so far as the Tunkers are concerned, in Pelham, the story was different. There, after John Winger left in 1799, John Winger was the first bishop of the Tunkers. The Tunkers, we don't know exactly who the leadership was. There probably was an early minister by the name of Pattison, but it isn't too clear about his leadership. But there was involvement by the daimyods in political office. And a direct descendant of Anna Winger, who was a daughter of John Winger, A.B. daimyod, was reeve of Fonthill and also member of Parliament for Welland for two terms. And it's said that he won the election with the largest majority that had ever been gotten up to that particular point. The Tunkers went to the Baptists, and some of them went to the Church of Christ in the Pelham area. And of course, as far as the Mennonites are concerned, I mentioned earlier that they went to the various different denominations. Now, let me just mention, in regard to political involvement of the Tunkers, a theory that John Bossert has, who is a Brethren in Christ lay preacher over in Stevensville. He says that there's a family tradition in his family that there was trouble among the Tunkers quite early in Pelham, that there was quite a bit of disagreement. And he thinks, the family tradition is that they think that the disagreement was over whether or not they would lay claim to be United Empire loyalists. Winger and Sider didn't want to claim to be loyalists because of the military connection the term or the name had, whereas others in the Pelham area did want to be known as loyalists. And that was probably one of the reasons why there was earlier acculturation in the Pelham area and not much in the Black Creek area. Incidentally, in the Black Creek or Stevensville area, the Tunkers kept free of political involvement, or relatively free anyway, until just recently, when Gerv Fretz was first elected, and some of them actually got out and campaigned for Gerv Fretz, I understand. My wife and I went to a political rally up at Port Colborne to hear Mulrooney, and we just went for the show, but we saw some Brethren in Christ people there that were there in deadly earnest as supporting the political efforts of Gerv Fretz. A word about the Quakers. In Black Creek, as I said, they disappeared quite early, and it was perhaps because of lack of leadership there. No name has survived of any strong leader of the Quakers from the Black Creek area. There is one interesting name that's a bit of a mystery. There is said to have been a Quaker preacher by the name of Silas Furry, who, according to one tradition, helped to build a windmill at what is now Windmill Point. Another tradition says that it was a Silas Carter, and that he was a preacher too. It could be that there were two Silases that worked together on that windmill. It's hard to disentangle those two traditions. But Silas Furry was said to have been a Quaker preacher, and he was killed by Indians as he was returning from the Lowbanks area, from visiting family members up there. The date of his being killed is uncertain, but it was sometime after 1812. There's a reference to that on your map with 1812 and a question mark after that. In Pelham, there was quite a strong Quaker leadership. There was a man by the name of William Wetherold, who had been an educator. He started a school in Ontario and then went down and taught at a school in the States, came back to Pelham and bought a farm there, and then became an outstanding Quaker preacher and leader. And his daughter, Ethelwyn Wetherold, became a rather noted poetess. And some of her, she has several books of poetry that are published. The evangelical influence didn't seem to have any harmful effect on the Quakers. It did on the Mennonites. As I indicated earlier, many of them went to the evangelical movements, such as the Methodists, but it didn't seem to affect the Tunkers so much because they had a form of evangelicalism of their own right from the beginning. They were influenced by pietists, and they talked a great deal about the new birth, and that was similar to the teachings of Methodism, so they weren't influenced a great deal. But the Quakers, the only ones that are left in the Niagara Peninsula are the more progressive ones, the ones who early accommodated themselves to the evangelical movement. What influence did the plain folk, so-called, have on each other? And I'd like to read a little bit of the article that I prepared for the Mennonite Historical Society on that point. Why did the Tunkers, what was the influence of the plain folk on each other? Why did the Tunkers first call themselves the Society of Tunkers in Pelham, and later also at first in Black Creek? Obviously, the term society was borrowed from the Society of Friends. And we might ask the question, did the use of the word society for the Tunkers have anything to do with a strong tradition that Tunker Bishop John Winger was the first minister outside of the Church of England to be granted the right to perform marriages? The Quakers, with their non-liturgical marriage, had that right from the very beginning. Another question, did the early Tunker emphasis on the new birth have anything to do with the fact that the Pelham Friends Church is now the only Orthodox evangelical Friends Church in Canada? Another question, did the Quaker readiness to go into politics after 1833, when an affirmation rather than an oath of allegiance was made legal, and John Gould identified himself with Mackenzie and the Reformers in 1837 and 1838, and later was Member of Parliament for North Ontario in 1854, did that have anything to do with the Pelham Tunkers losing their anti-political stance? Was the Tunker insistence on baptism by immersion the reason the Pelham Tunkers mostly went to the Baptists and the Clinton Tunkers to the Disciples rather than to the Mennonites? Why was the Tunker-Mennonite change of denomination mostly from Mennonite to Tunker in the peninsula and from Tunker to Mennonite in Waterloo County? We're rather late getting into the history of these plain folk in the peninsula, so we'll probably never have enough evidence to answer all of these questions satisfactorily. However, the Mennonites and the Tunkers and the Quakers, to a certain extent, did have many ideas in common. Ideas which were relatively new to Canada and important for the development of our character. First, we all agreed on the principle of self-determination in religion. We all rejected the idea that God's grace comes through some form of liturgy, or that it was imposed on an individual, or that it was imposed on a territory. In two of our groups, infant baptism was rejected. In the case of the Quakers, baptism as a whole was rejected. It was a baptism only of the Spirit. And all three groups agreed that baptism was only for the prepared soul. It was also a short step from personal freedom in religion to freedom of religion for others. And that's an important point, and one that could be developed a great deal more, but I won't take the time to do it now. But I would like to repeat that it was only a short step from personal freedom in religion to freedom of religion for others. We also agreed that war was not a proper means of solving conflict. Commandeered Mennonite and Tunker horses may have strengthened British military power, and food from their farms did that as well. But the idea of the renunciation of war was a much stronger force for peace than all of our teams combined. Peace movements everywhere in the world are following an idea that was totally new to Canada in 1800. It was an idea before its time that an alternative to war must be found. Third, we agreed that Christian faith was a matter for the workplace. We didn't hold land in clergy reserves, we worked it. Our preachers all worked for a living and were available to each congregation. One preacher, Peter Shirk, had the good sense not to preach again after he tried it once. Some never did well. Others did very well indeed. They all shunned professionalism in religion for very practical reasons, in part because of their concept of the church as a community of believers. The church in the workplace is a concept that we had originally and have all but lost. Other churches now, especially the Catholic Church, is picking up that idea. And in South America and in other parts of the world, priests are working alongside the people, with the people. And I believe that all churches must get into the workplace if they are not to be irrelevant in today's world. Now, there are probably many other ideas that I could mention too that were brought here by these early pioneers, but I think that the techniques of agriculture, the ability they had to clear the land and start life here were important, but they were not as important as these ideas of freedom, of personal responsibility, and of the involvement of the church in the workplace. And as I said, these are ideas that in part have been lost, but are now being regained by other groups, and I think are extremely important. Let me just mention in closing something about the later coming of Mennonites to the peninsula. In the 1920s, a number of Russian Mennonites came after the revolution in Russia made life so difficult for them. They found it difficult to stay there. And then in 1940, during the Second War, again, the Mennonites in Russia had an opportunity to get out of the country when the German armies came and enable them to do so. I was just talking with my son-in-law last night, who knows a person up in the Vineland area that was offered a revolver by the invading German army in the 1940s. He was in Russia at that time, and they said to him, either you take this revolver and join our SS, or we're going to use it to shoot you. And he made. But these Russian Mennonites now, so-called, are much more numerous. They're here by the hundreds. It's interesting that they are very politically involved. The chairman of Metro Niagara is of the Niagara region, I mean to say, is a Mennonite, and a number of them have been involved in political office. But it would be an interesting study. I don't think anybody has made this study. Probably there isn't time to do it yet. It would be interesting to see what is happening to them in terms of acculturation and being absorbed into the community, because they've been here for probably 40 to 60 years now, and already there are quite a few changes. Will they be absorbed into the community as thoroughly as the Swiss Mennonites were after they have been here 100 years? The answer is probably yes. We'd like to take this opportunity to invite all of you to Vineland on the 1st of July for the special bicentennial celebrations there. There will be an unveiling of a special memorial in front of First Mennonite Church at Vineland at 1:30 on July the 1st, and then following that there will be a trek to Balls Falls and a program, a dramatic presentation, a masked male choir, a speech or two, and then a picnic after that. And anybody who would care to is very welcome to come. Well, the subject that I've attempted to cover is probably too broad today, but if you have any further questions, I'll be glad to try and answer them afterward. I'm not a professional historian, but I have been close to several of these Brethren in Christ and Mennonite groups, and I have suggested perhaps a few thoughts to you today about our history.
Do you want to present this to Mr. Nigh?
Yes, if you'd like to.
It's one of our new calendars.
Oh, fine.
Thank you. And this is a little
Thank
memento
you.
for
Thank you very much.
very interesting.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm sure Mr. Nigh has spent much time in in studying the history of the Mennonites, and I happen to know and have a good friend or some good friends of the Russian Mennonites that came over here, and certainly know of where he speaks in their struggle to get to a free land. He mentioned the logo on the on your brochure here, and it is quite unique. It must have taken considerable time and a steady hand to do it. I think Jackie Glenn deserves a good hearty hand clap for drawing this logo and making up this program for us. What do you think? Thanks, Jackie. Quite the artist. Next item on our program is the introduction of the Willoughby Historical Society Executive and the Willoughby Historical Museum Committee. And on the reverse side of your program, you will find all the names not necessary for me to read them. You have them there in front of you, and I'd just like to say thank you on behalf of the members of the Historical Society to the people who have done the work and the museum committee here. Just a tremendous amount of effort that these people put into it, and certainly I think it all shows up in our museum here, and in the efforts of the Historical Society to put on programs for you throughout the year. And we invite you to participate and bring your friends along. It's very hard in our community here, our community without a town in our midst, to have a large group of people attending our meetings. And the only way we can do it is to ask you people to come and invite your friends to come. We try to make it an interesting evening and informative evening. So at this time, we would like to ask John Bertniak, who is Brock University librarian, for our closing remarks here, and we certainly are always very glad to see John here with us on this occasion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Colville, ladies and gentlemen, I consider it a great privilege again to be asked to make some closing remarks at this year's open house at the Willoughby Historical Museum. I have been asked for a number of years now to make some closing remarks, and I do consider it an honor. I think that the Willoughby Historical Society is to be commended for its continuing good historical work over the nearly 20 years that this society has existed, and certainly the museum here is a fine example of their interest and involvement in maintaining and perpetuating the history of Willoughby Township. For it is the Willoughby Historical Society that operates this museum for the City of Niagara Falls Board of Museums. And certainly those of us who are involved with the museum board are concerned about the well-being of this museum. We know that it is short of space, but certainly we realize that Willoughby deserves a museum, and of course the City of Niagara Falls deserves a museum in this area. And Mr. Nigh has certainly alluded to the importance of Willoughby in the history of the Niagara Peninsula. Certainly, I think all of us should show our support for the work that the museum is doing here by visiting the museum a number of times through the summer and of course also bringing your family and friends whenever you can. I would like to congratulate Mr. Nigh for his interesting address on the history of the Mennonites in the Niagara Peninsula. It certainly is a very important occasion for those of Mennonite extraction, but also it's a very important event for us who are living here in the Niagara Peninsula. And we must realize that here we have an event that we are celebrating, and it's the bicentennial. That's 200 years. And I think this just underlines the importance of the Niagara Peninsula in our Ontario and Canadian history. And certainly, Mr. Nigh, we will be present at the ceremonies in Vineland within the next few weeks. To all of you, I say it's good to see you here again. It's my privilege to say these few words to you and to the officers and directors of the Willoughby Historical Society and the museum. And certainly we look forward to being here again next year, because amongst all the other things that the Willoughby Historical Society and Museum do well is that they always arrange for very fine weather, and we have had that today again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Well, thank you, John. And if you people want to know about the history of your peninsula here, I guess you'd say, or this part of the country, John has it all down in the Brock University in his library there. Tremendous amount of history and books and so on. And certainly, I guess it'd be available for anyone to go and visit you, John, would it? Yes. Yeah, it'd be a great occasion for anyone that's interested in the history of our country here to visit the library there. At this time, we have an item on our agenda here that we don't want to overlook. And usually at our meetings, our regular meetings, we ask if anyone has a birthday that month. And we try to sing happy birthday, but the person that usually does the leading and the singing has the birthday today. So I think we'll just say happy birthday to Mary Weaver and give her a good handshake. How's that? Many more. You. Happy birthday, dear Mary. Happy birthday to you. At this time, I would like to thank CJRN, and particularly Mike, the boy that, the gentleman that came with the unit here, did a good job of our sound system. So thank you, Mike. And to the Mennonites and Tunkers, congratulations on your 200th anniversary, of course. We hope that some of our people can join you on the 1st of July at Vineland. And thank you again for sharing this day with us. We hope you'll visit the museum after and stay for a cup of tea and a cookie. I think the girls are getting ready. And again, through the efforts of our secretary and her helpers, I don't know who they are, go to this great effort to put out a calendar, and the 1987 calendars are here and available for you to purchase in the museum there. Thank you one and all, and we'll enjoy visiting with you after. What did I miss, Emma?